now that the initial building is created, it's going to be really easy to add other elements to the building, things like a chimney or adding more to the structure itself. And we can use the same texture and really only need to modify the UV maps within the texture because we do have a lot to work with. So let's start by just kind of adding in a chimney for the side of the building. I'm just going to add in the cube object or create a cube. Switch to the model mode, and we can just adjust the scale that we need. And if you want to leave it a little taller so that you could use it on other buildings to kind of pull it up, then you can just make something a little larger, and then when you modify the UV map, just make sure that it's within range. So we could just place this on the side. I'm going to go ahead and just bring this in a little bit more, and then hit C on the keyboard to make it editable. Now I'm going to go up to the top and switch to the polygon mode, live selection tool. Select that top polygon and use the inner extrude, and we could just bring that in a little, and then M on the keyboard and T for the extrude, and just kind of pull that in. So it's just something fairly simple. And now all we need to do is assign it the material, where I'm going to be using the wall material, and then just modify the UV. So we'll select the wall material and drag it over onto the cube, which is going to automatically set up a UV mapping tag for it. Same with all of the other materials. It defaults to set up the UVW mapping. So right now it's being very stretched, so all we really need to do is just modify the UV. So we're going to select that cube object and switch over to the UV polygons. And we can see the current structure for it. Go up to, and we don't really have any textures loaded in for the texture editor. But in order to be able to see what we're working with for the wall texture, we're going to want to open that up. So now we have the wall material loaded in, and it's going to be a lot easier to place where we want the texture to be on the chimney. I'm going to deselect the polygon that we use to extrude and use the projection of the UV mapping to just set up a new set of UV maps. And using the cubic 2, looks like it'll probably work out the best, either that or the box mode. Box will stretch it out automatically for us. So actually we'll just use the box. And then we can select all of these polygons. And I'm going to use the rectangular selection, open the attributes, and make sure that only visible elements is turned off. And with all those selected, we can just switch to the scale tool, or the size tool. So scale, T on the keyboard, and then switch between move and just kind of move this around the UV map until we fit in an area that's going to be suitable. So even that right there is going to work. for the chimney. And we'll go ahead and just take a look at a render. And I do have my display set to quick shading so that I can see the back of the model. We'll go ahead and change that over. It does look like it caused a little bit of an error with the lighting. That's just a cinema bug. I believe it has to do with the diffusion. But it'll still render correctly, which is all I'm really worried about. So close-up doesn't look so great, but this is really meant for more of a distant shot. And if you need to, it might be a good idea to take the UV and limit it to the opposite side that's being viewed. So since we're seeing the door over here, you might want to make sure that that UV is placed maybe in an area of the texture towards the back that's not showing up. And that way it won't be obvious that the same map is being used and copied over. And if you do run into this bug, switching between the shading modes, normally just closing out Cinema, opening back up will typically fix that. Because most of the redraw from the materials won't trigger to fix that. For now, I want to keep this object separate so that I can add it onto other buildings. But if you do want to combine it, which would be the final step once a building is constructed, you can just use the connect object with the two objects and then make it editable, which will fit it all together. You may want to create a polygon selection, set the selection first to set up a tag for it. Most of the time when you create a connect object and there's no selection tag, it will generate a new one, so then you could just rename it. That will also be an acceptable way to do it. I also want to note that I did make a change to the model in the roof, where I took the polygons in the bottom part of the roof, and I'm just going to go ahead and select them, which I'm going to have to do by going inside the model. But what I did was scale them, changing the size so that they weren't straight anymore, and just brought them inside the building. And I did that on both sides. And then I did pull it down a little bit more. You might want to bring that back up. Also, if you see these lines that are showing up, those are caused by the edge of the normal map and the diffusion and how it was created, because I have set the material tag a little differently. So if we select the material tag, go to attributes, we can see that the tiles on the X I have set to 4. By default it's going to be 1, which is what we had earlier, and it might be a little too stretched out, so I set it to 4, and this way we'll see some of those little lines showing up. You could set it higher, and because we use the max UV amount to pull all that out, it's going to basically just double it and kind of tile it, which is a nice little way to add a lot of detail without using a large texture. And in this case it works pretty well, just to repeat that. For the most part we're going to be far enough away that it's really not going to be incredibly obvious, but if you were to create a close-up, then that would be a neat little way to add a repeating element. I'm also going to add another piece to the side, basically the same way I created the chimney. and just kind of connecting that to the UV map in the same way. Just creating another box, making sure that if we go below that it in the floor object, that if we take a look at the model, it is connecting. You can also take a look in another viewport. Because of the shading I have right now, the wireframe is kind of brown because of the color that's set up, so it is difficult to see. You could always change the display mode in the other viewports if you want to see a better representation. So what I want to do with this is go ahead, C on the keyboard, make it editable, select polygon, or actually we can go ahead and just grab that front edge. And right now I do want to pull it down along with the global coordinate. So we can right click and change the axis to world with the move tool selected, and then pull that down. And now it's a matter of just breaking down the polygons. I'm not going to worry about creating a lip or an edge for the part of the roof. So I'm just going to grab some of these polygons on the side and create a couple of selections. And we're going to need that back one too. I'm not going to worry about the bottom being real consistent. Basically the same as the top that's underneath the roof part of the main object. I'm going to switch over to my UV editor, and what we can do is go to selection, set the selection, go to attribute, and we can call that sides, and then select the top, deselect the tag, and set that selection. We'll just call it top. So this is going to be connected to the roof material, and we can just basically drag the other materials back over. So I'm going to select the roof, drag it onto there, and take that roof selection, which is the top, connect that, and then take the walls, drag it on top, and then set the selection to the sides. Go back into UV, and we can now select the polygons from the sides. So deselect everything first, select the side polygons, and then for the UV mapping, we can go ahead and set it to box. And I do need to show this mesh. And I might need to load back in that texture. And then we can go ahead and select all those polygons in the UV polygon, change the size, and just kind of scale that to fit. Making sure we're not going into the doors or windows. And that might be kind of difficult, so we might need to break down the UV a little further, because really the backside polygon we're not even going to see. So we can make that repeat just by dragging it on the outside. And because it is a bit taller, and right now it's stretched out on the sides, I do want to go to the transform, change the X scale. Let's go ahead and bring it down to 0.5 on the X, apply. We can move that in place, size it. And it's kind of showing up a little strange because I did hit that display bug again. And it might have something to do with body paint. But it should work out okay. Go ahead and grab the roof and basically do the same thing. So I'm going to deselect the polygon and go over to the attributes. We could just manually select the polygon. And it might be selecting everything. We deselect the back polygon, holding down Control. And then we do need to empty the canvas. So we can go up to Texture, Empty Canvas, and then the roof polygon. What we really have to do for this is just scale it down and move it below the halfway point. We don't need to worry about using the image. If you want to have that top tile portion that runs down the center be kind of a connecting piece for the back, then you would just need to intersect the back piece with that. And that should be more than enough to show up from a distance. You really just need to scale it so that the tiles will match. And let's take a look at a quick render. So that's something that could work definitely from a distance. The roof piece on top should probably have a little bit of separation, so I could extrude that and then take those polygons that are extruded and use the max UV like I did for the other trim. So we just copy that over. But from a little bit of a distance, they should be fine. The normal mask will take care of just about everything. But this is just a really easy way to create variations of buildings. If you're going to have a whole bunch of them that are far away from the camera, and the really fine details don't matter as much. So once you make enough little element variations, you can start to piece together buildings and create a city out of them, or at least enough variation where you'll be able to duplicate them and not really pick out the individual ones.